My name is Lucas. If you met me in real life, you'd probably think I'm an ordinary college student at a public university in the Midwest of the United States. Gray hoodie, headphones always dangling around my neck, backpack heavy with books, paper coffee cup in hand every morning. I study communications, live in an old dorm built in the 80s, where the hallways always carry a faint smell of instant noodles and cheap laundry detergent. No one knows that, behind that ordinary appearance, I'm hiding a romance. One I believe is the most beautiful in my life, but also the thing that scares me the most. Daniel. I met Daniel in the fall semester of my sophomore year, in the class American Literature since 1945. He sat 2 rows in front of me, with dark brown hair that was slightly curly, and his neck always flushed red when he bent down to write. Daniel had a unique way of sitting, leaning slightly to one side, one leg propped up on the chair in front, pen clipped between his fingers as if it were an extension of his thoughts. The first time I really noticed Daniel was when the professor called his name to speak. Daniel Moore. He looked up, a bit startled, then stood. His voice was deep, clear, not overly confident but not trembling at all. He talked about loneliness in post-war literature, about characters who survived but didn't truly live. I remember stopping my note-taking at some point, just to listen to him speak, and feeling something in my chest sink, as if someone had just named the emotion I'd never dared to confront. After class, I deliberately walked slowly. Daniel was stuffing books into his backpack when I spoke up. Your analysis was really good. He turned around, a bit surprised. His eyes were gray-blue, the color of the sky before rain. Thanks, he smiled. I think I talked too much.
I'm Lucas.
Daniel. We shook hands. Just a brief, normal touch. But his palm was warm, and I remembered that feeling longer than necessary. From that day on, we started sitting closer together in class. Then study groups. Then coffee after class. Daniel was the type who didn't talk much, but whenever he did, I always wanted to hear him out to the end. He liked indie music, hated noisy parties, and had a habit of furrowing his brow when thinking. I discovered that I remembered every little detail about him, as if my brain automatically archived everything related to Daniel Moore. We both had girlfriends, on paper at least. I did, anyway. A vague relationship that dragged on from freshman year, just enough to keep others from asking questions. Daniel didn't talk much about his love life. He only said one thing very softly when we were sitting on the library steps near midnight. There are things easier if not named. I understood what he meant, and I hated that I understood. Everything crossed the line on a winter evening, when the snow fell so thick that the school announced an early closure. My dorm lost power. Daniel texted, "You okay?"
Irraplia. No.
"Can I come over?" Daniel's room was warm with soft yellow light. We drank cheap beer, chatted about nonsense, then fell silent. Outside the window, snow blanketed the parking lot, the world as if paused. I don't remember who moved closer first. I just remember the moment his lips touched mine. Slow, hesitant, but not wrong. My heart pounded so hard I was afraid Daniel could hear it. His hands trembled when they touched my back, as if he was scared too, desiring it too, having waited for this moment far too long. We said nothing afterward, just sat side by side, shoulders touching, like two people who had just stepped through a door they couldn't turn back from. The next morning, we agreed on one thing, unspoken. We would hide it. Hide the lingering glances. Hide the midnight texts. Hide Daniel's hand gently squeezing mine under the desk. Hide this love to stay safe. But I soon realized, some things grow bigger the more you hide them in the dark. And the romance between me and Daniel was not small. After that snowy night, everything between me and Daniel changed, but the surface of our lives didn't. By day, we were still 2 ordinary students, sitting next to each other in crowded classes, laughing just enough at the professor's jokes, debating the readings as if our lips had never touched in a quiet dorm room. I called his name in crowds with the most neutral voice possible. "Daniel, what do you think?" And he responded with the familiar nod, his gaze brushing over me just once. No more, no less. But as soon as no one was watching, the world shifted colors. A brush of shoulders in a narrow hallway. A note slipped over with handwritten words. Library tonight? A very faint smile, just enough for the two of us to see. We learned to exist in those small moments. As if our love wasn't allowed to take up space, only to slip through the cracks. Daniel was the one who set the boundaries. At school. Keep some distance, okay? He said one evening as we sat on my bed, feet dangling close to the floor. At least for now. I nodded, even though something stung in my chest. I understood. I always understood. Our school wasn't exactly hostile, but it wasn't absolutely safe either. The harmless jokes in the locker rooms, the scrutinizing looks when two guys walked too close, the whispers you were never sure if you'd misheard. Daniel grew up in a small town in Indiana. Religious family, his dad a former military man. I never asked much, but just seeing how he tensed up whenever someone joked about gay people, I knew that fear had followed him for a long time. I was different. I came from Chicago, a big, noisy city that at least gave me the sense that I wasn't completely alone. But college was its own world, with its own rules, and I'd chosen silence to survive. We dated in the shadows. Daniel's room when his roommate went home. My car parked in a distant lot, back seats folded down. Study group outings that stretched past midnight. Daniel, when alone with me, wasn't the same as the Daniel in class. He was softer, smiled more. Sometimes he'd lay his head on my chest, listening to my heartbeat, then whisper, "Lucas, do you ever think about where this is headed?" I didn't answer right away. I stroked his hair slowly. If I think too much, I'll get scared. He smiled sadly. Me too. We kissed as if each kiss needed to be memorized carefully, in case one day we couldn't do it anymore. Daniel liked pressing his forehead against mine before kissing, like a private ritual. I liked the way he whispered my name when things became too real, too close. But by day, he pulled back. Once, I unconsciously placed my hand on his back in the library. Just a light touch. Daniel startled, shifted away, his eyes quickly scanning the room. I pulled my hand back like I'd been burned. No one said anything, but the air between us grew thick. That night he texted, "Sorry." Panicked. I replied, "I know." But the truth was I was starting to get tired. Tired of measuring every gesture. Tired of loving someone without being allowed to love them openly. Tired of feeling like our love itself was a danger. The semester dragged on. Coursework pressure mounted. We had our first argument the night before spring break. "I can't keep living like this," I said, my voice low but tense. "It's like I'm your shameful secret." Daniel was silent for a long time. Then he said, "You think it doesn't hurt me? You think I don't want to hold your hand in the middle of campus? Then why don't you?" "Because I'm scared, Lucas." His voice cracked. "Because I'm not ready to lose everything." I looked at him, and for the first time I didn't know where I stood in his life. Was I love? Or just something he kept hidden for himself, out of the world's reach? We didn't break up. But from that day, there was an extra distance between us, invisible but always there. And I started to wonder, was hiding for safety slowly killing the most precious thing we had? That distance didn't vanish. It grew quietly, like a crack in the wall that you only notice once it's spread too far. Spring break arrived. Daniel went back to Indiana. I stayed on campus, picking up extra shifts at the coffee shop near the North Gate. We texted each other, but not as often as before. His messages were short, safe, as if someone was always standing behind him, reading every word. "Home's fine. Parents asking a lot. I miss you." The last line came near midnight. I stared at the screen for a long time before replying. "I miss you too." Just that. I didn't dare write more, afraid I'd say too much. When Daniel returned to school, he looked different. Shoulders more tense. Fewer smiles. As if he'd donned an invisible layer of armor that I wasn't allowed to touch. We hugged in his room, tight, long. But there was something awkward about it. As if we were both questioning whether this hug was still safe. Things started to unravel from a birthday party. A friend from class invited me, saying it was just close friends. I wasn't planning to go, but Daniel said, "Go." You need to have more fun. I arrived late. The apartment was cramped, music blaring, beer overflowing the sink. I saw Daniel on the balcony, talking to a blonde girl from the biology department. She laughed loudly, her hand touching his arm in a natural way. I stood frozen, feeling like someone was squeezing my chest. When Daniel spotted me, his eyes faltered for a moment. Just a second. Then he turned back to the girl, continuing the conversation as if I were just a casual acquaintance from class. I drank too much. Not enough to get drunk, but enough for the repression of the past months to rise up in my throat. When I pulled Daniel into the dark hallway, my voice was no longer calm. "What are you doing?" He frowned. "Just talking. You don't have to act like that." Daniel lowered his voice. "Lucas, this isn't the time." "Then when is?" I whispered, anger and pain mixing together. "Or do I only exist when no one else is watching?" He looked at me for a long time. That look scared me more than the silence. "I can't give you what you want," he said. "At least not now." I smiled faintly. "So what do I want?" "To be out in the open," he replied. "To be seen. And I can't do that yet." That night I went home alone. We didn't text for 3 days. 3 days that felt so long I started wondering if I was losing him. Not because the love had ended, but because we were no longer in sync with this fear. On the 4th day, Daniel knocked on my door near midnight. I opened it, and before I could say anything, he hugged me tightly. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice choked. "I don't want to lose you." I pressed my forehead against his shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent. Soap, books, and something uniquely Daniel. "I don't either," I said. "But I can't keep erasing myself for you." We sat down on the bed. Daniel held my hand, gripping it so tight it hurt. "I'm trying," he said. "I really am." I believed him, and maybe that was the most dangerous part. In the weeks that followed, we tried again, slower, more cautiously. Daniel started changing small things. Sitting closer to me in study groups. Not avoiding my gaze in public. Once, he let his hand brush mine on the cafeteria table, just for a second, but it was deliberate. I clung to those moments like lifelines, until the day the rumors started spreading. I heard it in the men's bathroom. 2 voices, low but not low enough. "Hey, you seen Daniel with that Lucas guy?" "Yeah, kinda close." I stepped out, my heart pounding. The 2 fell silent. Awkward smiles. I washed my hands for a long time, staring at myself in the mirror. For the first time, I wondered, if they knew, would Daniel stay? And I was afraid of the answer. Rumors are like smoke. You don't see the source of the fire, but the smell of burning spreads everywhere. First, it was just glances. Lingering looks in class that lasted longer than usual. A few quiet laughs when Daniel and I walked into the room together. I started choosing seats farther from him out of reflex. Daniel noticed, but he didn't say anything. Just that every time our eyes met, I saw something in them that looked a lot like guilt. One afternoon, Daniel pulled me behind the humanities building, where few people passed by. "Have you heard anything?" he asked. I didn't pretend not to know. "Yes," he sighed, leaning back against the cold brick wall. "I don't want this to become a topic." "But it already is," I said softly. "You're just not ready to face it." Daniel fell silent. I hated that silence because I knew he was weighing options, fearing, looking for an out. "Lucas," he said finally, "if things get out of control, I don't want to hurt you." He corrected himself. "I don't want to hurt us." I smiled sadly. "You think we're not already hurt?" The question hung in the air. Daniel didn't answer, and that non-answer made me realize something painful. When it came down to choosing between safety and me, he was still hesitating. Everything shattered at the school's spring festival. Music, colored lights, students dancing drunkenly on the grass. I wasn't planning to go, but Daniel said, "Go with the group to avoid suspicion." To avoid suspicion. Those 3 words stabbed right through me. We went with a few mutual friends. Daniel laughed, chatted, blended in perfectly. I stood beside him, close enough to feel his warmth, but far enough not to touch. Then someone asked very casually, "Daniel, you dating anyone?" My heart stopped. Daniel laughed, shook his head.
No.
Just one word. Short, sharp.
No hesitación.
I turned away before anyone could see the expression on my face. I walked quickly, away from the grass, the music, the crowd. I didn't know where I was going, just that I couldn't stay there for another second. Daniel found me later, in the west parking lot, where the yellow lights cast shadows on the cracked pavement. "Lucas," he called. "I can't," I said right away, my voice trembling but resolute. "I can't keep doing this." Daniel stepped closer. "You're overreacting." "No." I cut him off. "I'm waking up." He froze. "I love you," I said. For the first time, I said it out loud, in a place without four walls to shield us. But I can't keep loving someone who treats this love like something to deny in front of others. Daniel stood still, the light making his face look more exhausted than I'd ever seen. "I'm not ready," he said. "I wish I could say something different." I nodded. "Then we should stop." Saying those words felt like ripping off a piece of my own skin. But I knew, if we didn't stop, I'd keep vanishing, little by little. We didn't hug.
No goodbyekis.
Daniel just stood there, watching me turn and walk away, and I didn't dare look back, afraid I'd change my mind. The weeks that followed were a void. I changed my schedule to avoid seeing him. I threw myself into schoolwork, my job, anything that could exhaust me enough not to think. But at night, when everything was quiet, Daniel still appeared, in memories, in the lingering scent of old soap on the hoodie I hadn't had the heart to wash. I wondered if he was okay, if he missed me, if he regretted it. Then, one early summer morning, I got an email from him. "Lucas, I'm transferring schools. To the East Coast. My family's moving. I don't know if you want to see me before I go. But if you do, I'll be at the old library at 7 p.m. tonight." I stared at the screen for a long time. Some romances don't end in hatred, but in a silence that stretches too long. And I didn't know if seeing Daniel again would heal me or shatter me once more. But at 6:50, I was standing in front of the library door. The old library was almost empty. The semester had ended, with only a few students lingering in town for the summer. Yellow light shone down on the dark wooden shelves. The air so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat as I walked in. Daniel was sitting at the table by the window, the exact spot where we'd studied together so many times. He was wearing an old denim jacket, his hands resting on an open book, but his eyes weren't on it. When he saw me, he stood up abruptly, as if he'd been waiting. We stood facing each other, less than a meter apart, but it felt like an entire year had wedged itself between us. "You came," he said. "Yeah." Just 2 words. But my throat was dry. We sat down. No one spoke for the first few seconds. I noticed Daniel looked thinner, with dark circles under his eyes. Maybe he hadn't been sleeping much either. "I'm leaving next week," he said. "Boston." I nodded. "That's far." "Yeah." He smiled faintly. "But maybe it's for the best." I twisted the cheap ring on my finger, a habit I'd picked up recently, as a way to ground myself in the present. "Are you okay?" Daniel looked at me. This time he didn't look away. "Not really." That answer hurt, but it also brought a strange sense of relief. At least we were being honest. "I've thought a lot," he continued, his voice low. "About us. About you." I took a deep breath. "Daniel, if you called me here just to—" "No," he interrupted. "I'm not here to ask to get back together. Just want to apologize. Properly." He placed his hands on the table as if needing support. "I loved you, Lucas. I still do. But I chose safety over you. And I hate myself for it." My chest tightened. These were words I'd dreamed of hearing, but not in this context. "I don't blame you," I said softly, and I realized I meant it. "I'm just sad that we weren't in the same place in our lives." Daniel nodded, his eyes reddening. "I wish I'd been braver. I wish I could go back to that moment, at the spring festival, and say something different." "I wished that too," I said. But if it had happened, maybe I wouldn't have learned to choose myself. We looked at each other. For the first time in a long while, there was no fear hanging between us. Just a gentle sadness and a deep understanding that some loves don't fail because of a lack of sincerity, but because they came at the wrong time. Daniel stood up. Can I hug you? I hesitated for a beat, then nodded. The hug wasn't rushed, wasn't filled with desire. It was just two people who had once loved each other deeply, allowing themselves a complete goodbye. I breathed in that familiar scent one last time, and this time, I didn't try to memorize it. I let it fade. When we pulled apart, Daniel smiled, a sad but relieved smile. Thank you for loving me and for being brave enough to walk away. Goodbye, Daniel, I said. Goodbye, Lucas. I left the library first. Outside, the sky was dark, the summer wind carrying the smell of damp grass. I stood there for a moment, took a deep breath, then walked away. Months later, as I started the new semester, people no longer whispered about me and Daniel. The rumors had vanished as if they'd never existed. Life moved on. I met new people. Some held my hand in the middle of campus without fear. Some asked about Daniel, and I told the story without bitterness, without regret. It was just a part of me. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, I still think about the romance we hid away for safety. I think about the cost of that safety, the fearful nights, the unspoken words, the touches withdrawn. But I also think about what we gave each other, the first truth, the first love deep enough to change how I saw the world. And I realized something late, but very true. Hiding can keep you safe for a moment, but only by daring to live authentically can you truly be free. For Daniel, that romance is a scar. For me, it's a beginning,